The alien armada unleashed fire on the skies, but humanity answered with steel and will. The skies over Earth had never looked so violent, and in those last quiet minutes before the alien armada tore apart the upper atmosphere, humanity still clung to the illusion that its homeworld could never be violated, that its blue oceans and sprawling continents were somehow too sacred for war to ever desecrate. But when the first wave of plasma fire fell like liquid lightning across the stratosphere, burning red streaks across the heavens, the illusion shattered forever, and in orbit, the first defense satellite screamed warnings across encrypted channels as thousands of alien warships locked their weapons on the planet below, their formation blotting out starlight, a steel curtain descending with the force of gods. And yet even as the news channels on Earth flickered with panic and civilians ran to shelters built more for earthquakes than war, the commanders of the global defense fleet did not bow, because they had been waiting for this day, training for it in simulations they had prayed would remain fiction. And now that the nightmare was real, they understood that history would not forgive hesitation, for this was not simply the first battle for survival, it was the battle that would define whether humanity was destined to remain a voice in the galaxy or be reduced to ash before it had ever spoken beyond its solar cradle. Admiral Jonathan Raines stood aboard the GDFS Resolute, the flagship of Earth's fleet, and though every sensor reported impossible odds, though tactical AI repeated in cold probability models that humanity's chance of survival was less than 4%, he remained still, a man carved from stone, his jaw tight, his eyes unwavering as the screens before him filled with alien signatures, each one a warship larger than most cities, bristling with weapons powered by technologies humanity had barely begun to grasp. But Raines was not alone in his defiance, for orbiting alongside Resolute were 54 human warships, cruisers, destroyers, and carriers forged in orbital shipyards over the last 20 years, each crewed by men and women who had sworn to stand even when the odds demanded surrender. And as the first wave of alien bombardment slammed into the planet's magnetosphere, scattering auroras like firestorms across both hemispheres, Earth's fleet ignited engines of steel and, well, engines that had been built not for conquest but for survival, engines that burned with the knowledge that this was the line they could not afford to yield. The alien armada was ancient, its ships moving with precision and unity that spoke of centuries of discipline, their hulls glowing with energy fields that laughed at railgun fire and particle beams. But even as the aliens advanced, confident that no fledgling species could resist their dominion, humanity answered with fire of its own, missile bays opening across the fleet, torpedo salvos streaking into the void, nuclear warheads detonating in radiant blossoms that briefly outshone the sun. A desperate, furious answer hurled into the dark, and though most of the alien vessels shrugged off the explosions, though their shields rippled but did not collapse, a handful of ships faltered, a handful of titans bled molten fragments into the vacuum. And for the first time in their long history of conquest, the alien commanders realized that the humans were not prey, not simply another primitive civilization to subjugate with a show of force, but a species that had grown sharp on struggle, a species that understood that survival was not given but seized through sacrifice. On Earth, cities trembled as alien firestorms pierced through the atmosphere, hammering coastal defenses and military installations. But the world did not burn quietly, for from missile silos hidden in mountains, from stealth bombers cloaked in the clouds, from submarines that rose from the deep like leviathans, humanity's counterattack blazed upward, filling the sky with streaks of fire, a storm of defiance painted against the black canvas of space. And though billions of lives trembled in fear below, billions more clenched their fists in unity, for no longer was this war fought by generals alone, it was fought by an entire species refusing to kneel, their voices echoing in prayers, in curses, in unspoken promises that if the end was to come, it would come with humanity screaming into the dark, not begging for mercy. Admiral Raines gave the order with a voice steady as iron, "Hold the line." 3 words carried across the fleet, 3 words that became the heartbeat of humanity's resistance, and as the alien armada unleashed wave after wave of plasma fire, tearing through orbital stations and vaporizing defense satellites, Earth's warships weaved and struck back, their armor peeling away under the storm but their weapons never silenced, and in the command deck of the Resolute, amidst the chaos of alarms and the screams of wounded crew, Raines' eyes locked on the tactical display, where the alien formation stretched like an endless ocean of death, and he whispered not to his crew but to the entire species listening on encrypted frequencies, "We are not breaking today." It was not arrogance, not denial, but a truth forged in the crucible of humanity's history, for every scar of war, every uprising, every fight for freedom that had ever marked the human story now converged in this moment. And though the fleet was outnumbered 100 to 1, though each loss felt like a knife twisting in the heart of Earth, Still the humans fought, still they clawed at the impossible wall of alien steel, and when the first alien dreadnought fell, its vast hull split apart by concentrated missile strikes and the suicidal charge of a human destroyer that rammed its core reactor, the galaxy bore witness to something it had long forgotten. The will of a young species willing to die not for conquest, not for expansion, but for home. And in that moment, though the battle was far from decided, though the void still roared with the fire of war, humanity proved something to themselves, to the alien armada, and to history itself, that when the skies burned and doom descended, they would answer not with surrender but with steel and will, and this was only the beginning of the war. The Earth's sky burned red as alien firepower tore through clouds and ignited the upper atmosphere, but amid the chaos of orbital bombardment the will of humanity only grew sharper, like iron hardened in flame, and on the ground survivors gathered in bunkers, cities lay in ruins, and fleets of emergency craft ferried refugees away from impact zones while above them in orbit the war was being decided, for the human fleet that had once been scattered in desperate retreat had reassembled in defiance of annihilation, and at the heart of it stood Admiral Marcus Hale aboard the battleship Resolute, a vessel whose blackened armor still carried scars from the first clash with the alien armada yet whose crew's determination remained unbroken, their hands steady on controls and their voices clipped with discipline as if fear itself had no place in their veins, and across the fleet encrypted signals passed like whispered prayers between ships, commanders pledging not surrender but vengeance, for the first wave of bombardment had not shattered Earth's defenses entirely, it had woken them, pulled dormant weapon systems from old Cold War silos, awakened orbital railguns left in mothballs, and rallied nations fractured by politics into a singular defiant will that said no alien fire would decide the fate of humankind. And so when the alien armada regrouped to prepare its second wave, far more devastating than the first, they found Earth no longer panicked but organized, no longer scattering but converging, and the humans who once fled now advanced, their steel machines streaking through space to meet fire with fire. The alien superweapon had not been fully revealed yet, only tested in flashes of devastation that vaporized entire defense grids in seconds, and intelligence guessed it was a planet-cracking energy device, something designed not just for battle but for extinction, and so Hale convened his war council aboard the Resolute. His officers gathered around the projection table where holographic schematics flickered with alien positions, the star map littered with red as the alien fleet encircled Earth, like wolves surrounding wounded prey. Yet the Admiral's voice carried no tremor as he laid down the next phase of humanity's counterstrike, a bold and reckless maneuver that would send half the fleet forward in distraction while the other half, spearheaded by the Resolute, would dive into the heart of the alien formation to locate and neutralize the superweapon before it could fully charge. A plan so desperate it bordered on madness, but desperation was now humanity's strongest weapon because the aliens expected surrender, not suicide runs, and they would underestimate how far humans would go to protect their world, their families, and their future. Even as he gave orders, Hale remembered the broken transmissions from cities burning under orbital fire, voices screaming in terror before signals cut into silence, and he let that memory fuel his resolve, his crew sensing the same flame within themselves, for in that war room they no longer fought for abstract notions of nations or politics but for the children hiding underground, for the old who could not flee, for the lovers separated by evacuation orders, and for the millions whose only hope rested in the ships above. And so when the order came to break formation and begin the spear assault, the fleet obeyed without hesitation, their thrusters igniting in unison, carving white-blue trails across the void as if humanity itself had painted defiance into the stars. The alien response was swift, their armada shifting like a living beast, sleek ships with shimmering hulls adapting positions as if controlled by one vast mind, their energy lances slicing into advancing human frigates, tearing through shields and detonating fuel reserves and blossoms of fire, but for every human vessel that died another pressed forward, refusing to break, and the distraction force pulled the alien hunters outward, drawing their formation open like a net being stretched, until a gap formed near the fleet's heart where intelligence suggested the superweapon was carried aboard a colossal flagship, a vessel larger than any human city, its silhouette blotting starlight, its hull pulsing with veins of energy as if alive, and toward that abyssal monster Hale drove the Resolute and her escorts, their formation tightening into a spearhead, shields flaring under bombardment but engines pushing harder as if human will itself had become fuel. Within the Resolute chaos reigned but discipline held, alarms blaring as energy surges pounded her armor, engineers working in choking smoke to reroute power through damaged conduits, medics dragging the wounded from flaming corridors, gunners screaming target locks while the ship shuddered with each hit, And yet through it all Hale's voice remained steady over the intercom, telling his crew they were humanity's blade and no blade dulls while the hand holding it still stands, his words echoing through steel and hearts alike, binding everyone aboard into one unyielding organism whose only thought was survival through defiance. And that unity radiated into the fleet itself, commanders quoting his lines to their crews until every human ship burned with the same willpower, a network of courage strung through the void. They pierced deeper into the alien formation, the enemy realizing too late what humanity intended, their reinforcements converging but stretched thin by the distraction fleet's relentless harassment. And soon the Resolute and her escorts had visual of the alien flagship, a monstrosity of architecture and menace, its surface crawling with weapon ports, its core glowing with a malignant radiance that seemed to bend space around it, and sensors confirmed it. This was the carrier of the superweapon. The very device that could shatter Earth like glass if allowed to charge fully, and at once the human ships opened fire with everything they had, railgun slugs, missile barrages, plasma bolts streaking across black space, detonating against the flagship's shimmering shields which rippled like water but held firm, and the retaliatory blast from its main batteries ripped 2 human destroyers to nothing in seconds, their crew's final cries snuffed out before they even knew they were dead. Still they pressed on, the Resolute's hull glowing white from heat, her armor plates peeling away under punishment but her cannons never silent, and as the battle raged Hale realized brute force would not break the alien colossus. They needed precision, a strike at the weapon's charging core, and so he ordered the fleet to close distance even though it meant suicide, for only up close could they punch through, and humanity was always at its deadliest when cornered, and so engines roared as human ships slammed forward, colliding into alien screens, ramming, detonating point-blank warheads, creating firestorms of debris that tore holes in the enemy defenses, and through those gaps the Resolute surged, her prow burning like a comet of vengeance as she drove straight toward the flagship's heart. Inside the alien flagship the superweapon pulsed brighter, its energy field expanding, sensors screaming as space itself warped, and the humans knew they were racing seconds before the weapon's activation, every heartbeat a countdown to Earth's death, and though losses mounted the fleet did not falter, because humanity had chosen this moment not for survival but for defiance, to tell the universe with blood and steel that they would not kneel, and as the Resolute dove closer Hale clenched the armrest of his chair, whispering to himself that even if they failed the aliens would remember humanity's scream across the void, because there is a power even beyond superweapons, the power of a people who refuse extinction. And so Chapter 2 closed not with victory nor defeat but with humanity's blade piercing toward the throat of the impossible, the Resolute locked on course, the alien armada converging like vultures, the earth trembling below as citizens prayed to skies on fire, and in that moment the fate of the world balanced on the steel of ships and the unyielding will of humankind. The morning after the first night of true victory was one the world would never forget, though for those aboard the battered steel hulls of Earth's fleet, it was less a morning and more an endless continuation of exhaustion and fire, the glow of shattered alien wreckage still illuminating the stratosphere like falling stars, and yet even in that ruin lay a sobering truth: this war was far from over, because the alien armada had only tested its claws and humanity's survival had cost blood and ships too many to count. So as dawn broke across charred cities and silent oceans, Captain Elias Varon stood on the bridge of the battered Resolute, staring at the flickering sensor readings that showed the enemy regrouping in the outer rings of Earth's orbit, their massive dreadnought still intact, its superweapon once more beginning to charge, and though his body trembled with fatigue, his spirit had never been clearer, for he understood now that humanity had not simply been defending Earth, they had been announcing to the universe that they would not kneel, and if that meant breaking themselves upon steel and fire until nothing was left, then so be it, because surrender was not written in human bones. The alien armada's commander, a being who had watched hundreds of civilizations crumble before their might, had not expected this resistance, and when their message came through the comms translated into harsh, distorted syllables, it carried both fury and something else that Elias recognized instantly. Fear, not the fear of loss, for their power was still immense, but the fear of something unknown, something they had not encountered in all their campaigns, and that was the sheer human refusal to break even when logic demanded surrender, a stubborn willpower that seemed to grow sharper the more it was pressed, and the commander spat words of contempt about how humanity was delaying the inevitable, how the skies would burn until not a single stone of Earth remained, yet Elias only listened and then replied with words that would be remembered forever. You made one mistake, you thought we would bow. But humanity doesn't bow. We build, we fight, and when you try to end us, we rise from the ashes stronger than before. Fire cannot break steel. And will cannot be conquered. His voice echoed through the bridge, and his crew, bruised, weary, some still bleeding from the last battle, felt a surge of strength return, because in those words was the truth they had all lived through, and with that spirit, they prepared to face the final wave. The alien superweapon ignited again, the dark void trembling as its energy coils glowed with power enough to split a planet, and the Resolute's hull groaned as it maneuvered into a position that seemed suicidal, placing itself directly between the alien dreadnought and the crippled remnants of the fleet behind them, a shield of steel and fire, and though the tactical officers screamed that no ship could withstand the strike, Elias gave the order anyway, his voice calm, steady as if this was the only choice that had ever existed. The crew did not question him because they knew their captain, and they knew this moment would define whether humanity lived or burned. As the weapon fired, a torrent of annihilation ripping across the void, Elias whispered only one word, "Now." And from deep within the Resolute, from secret hangars and compartments long hidden even from many of the fleet, humanity's last gambit revealed itself. A weapon not of destruction but of defiance, a pulse forged from stolen fragments of alien tech combined with human ingenuity, something untested, something that could fail in an instant, yet it was unleashed in the precise moment when the alien superweapon's energy reached full charge, creating not a shield but a fracture, a ripple in the wave of death, redirecting its force back upon the dreadnought itself. The explosion was beyond sight or sound, a light that turned night into day across half the planet, and when the glare faded, the alien superweapon was gone, its dreadnought split apart, fire spilling from its wounded core. The silence that followed was heavier than any roar of triumph, for in that silence the entire alien armada faltered, their formations breaking, their ships scattering, not because they had lost their weapons, but because they had lost something more, the certainty of victory. For the first time in their long reign of conquest, they realized they could be defeated, and humanity, bloodied and bruised, had shown them how. The battle that followed was not easy, hundreds more ships were lost, thousands more lives extinguished, but the tide had turned, and every alien ship that fell fed the courage of Earth's defenders, until at last the remnants of the Armada broke retreat, their war engines fleeing the system, leaving behind their wreckage and their dead. On the bridge of the Resolute, cheers erupted, tears fell, and exhausted bodies collapsed into one another, yet Elias stood silent, staring into the black where the enemy had vanished, knowing they would return, but also knowing something greater, that humanity had just proven itself in the harshest crucible the stars could offer. Reports streamed in from Earth below, cities scarred but standing, families mourning but united, billions looking skyward not with fear but with pride, for their warriors had not only defended them, they had redefined what it meant to be human. In the hours that followed, as ships were salvaged and dead were honored, a broadcast went out across the planet and into the stars, Elias himself speaking, his face worn, his eyes burning. This day will not be remembered as the day Earth was spared. This day will be remembered as the day Earth stood unbroken. Let them come again. Let them bring fire. We will meet them with steel and will, again and again until the stars themselves burn out. Humanity endures. And across the globe, in whispers and in shouts, from the smallest child to the oldest elder, those words were repeated, becoming not just a message but a vow. The alien commander, fleeing into the dark, carried with them a scar they could not erase, the knowledge that their empire had met its match, not in weapons or numbers, but in the hearts of beings who refused to yield. And so humanity's story, once fragile, once overlooked, was now written in the stars, forged in fire, carried on steel and bound by will. The war was not over, but Earth had already won something greater than victory. It had won its place among the stars, unbreakable, eternal.